Hi, and welcome. Today is January 10th, 2021. We're looking at some art world news with a warm cup of coffee. As usual, as things continue to get crazy, I will keep following along. I'm going to go over a few articles that focus on events that occurred in the US Capitol on Wednesday. Before we get started, if you like this kind of content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Look, I'm not going to take sides here left, right, center, X, Y, Z, whatever floats your boat. There's a whole lot of people who are suffering and upset, and I understand. But as a reminder, that's not the point of this series. We have institutions in the United States that have been in decline for years and are beginning to collapse due to decades of escalating political and financial corruption. There's a lot of people searching for a hero right now because they can't find a solution to problems they can't fix on their own. The first article I'm going to take a look at is from the Global Times and focuses on an illustration that's gaining a lot of popularity online. It's from a Chinese cartoonist, Wu Heqilin. What's interesting about this perspective is that it offers a multitude of corruption that's cyclical and interconnected. There are no saints and there are no saviors in the image that was created. I wanted to start with this image because it comes from a critical perspective outside of the States, and I think it's important to take a step back and really look at what's happening without picking a side. I'll add a link to the article if you'd like to take a look at the image or accompanying text on your own. With that, let's move on. I'm going to take a look at an article from NorthCentralPA.com. I'll have a link to this as well. It's one of the least heated and biased articles I was able to find that just goes through some of the damages that occurred in the Capitol. By least heated and biased, it doesn't mean that it's not biased or not heated. It's just the most minimal I've been able to find so far. It reads as such. After the tear gas settled in the U.S. Capitol, curators responsible for the building's preservation assessed the damage, according to the New York Times. Residue from tear gas, pepper spray, and fire extinguishers were left on statues, murals, historic benches, and shutters. Architect of the Capitol spokeswoman Erin Courtney told the art newspaper. Most of the damage was limited to graffiti, broken doors, and shattered glass, Courtney said. A building near the inaugural stands where President-elect Joe Biden plans to take the oath of office was defaced with graffiti, according to Courtney. A memorial placard of the late civil rights activist John Lewis was destroyed by the rioters, Maryland Representative Steny Hoyer tweeted. But the priceless works of art in the Rotunda Room, where Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg recently laid in state, were not damaged, Town and Country Associate Editor Lena Kim reported. Busts of George Washington and Martin Luther King Jr. were left untouched, as were the statues of National Statuary Hall, according to Kim. No major artworks were reported damaged despite the violent demonstrations, Sarah Barr reported in the New York Times. 2 bronze light fixtures designed by 19th century American architect Frederick Law Olmsted were broken, according to an inventory of the damage released by the architect of the Capitol and cited by Barr. A blood-like substance defaced a 19th century marble bust of President Zachary Taylor, Barr said. Some preservationists have suggested allowing some damage to remain as a historical marker, multiple art and news outlets report. A former director of policy development for the National Trust for Historic Preservation told Art News that the damage is a memento of the vulnerability of our institutions and a reminder of our need to protect them. Similarly, flags, signs, and debris left behind by the pro Trump rioters were collected and preserved as historical artifacts, a spokesperson for the House Administration Committee told the Washington Post. Pro-insurrection stickers and flags, as well as Speaker Nancy Pelosi's damaged nameplate, are being collected for preservation as part of an archive on Wednesday's events. The Hill's Celine Castro Nuovo reported. And I'll show you an image of the bust. So this is the bust of former President Zachary Taylor. That has a red substance that appears to be blood. So, moving on from here, I think it's important to acknowledge that representatives of cultural institutions such as museums are people who sometimes are extremely biased in their viewpoints. And that's why I think it's important to take a look at this situation after taking a step back and creating some distance. Spokespeople from cultural institutions and specific news outlets have a strong tendency to create politically biased positionings, and I think that this is actually very toxic and extremely ignorant. It fuels a lot of the dichotomous hate, and they're as implicated and responsible for this kind of thinking as any other influential group. And if I don't take a step back, I can't see how I'm being led by someone else to follow a herd. With that in mind, I have a link to two other articles. One is from Hyperallergic and another is from the New York Times. Imagine that you're playing chess and taking a multi-move approach. Have a cup of coffee, tea, or water, whatever it is you like to drink, while you're assessing the situation, and try not to get emotionally attached. And don't forget the decades-long context and maneuvering that led to these moments. With that, I have a question I want to help end this episode with. It's this idea of, quote, damage or preserving damage to a work of art and what those actions might suggest. It sort of fetishizes the idea of preservation in a kind of like a perverse way to me. Choosing to preserve damage intentionally in order to position the object as a voiceless witness to an event. It, in many ways, places the meaning of the object second because the choice was to attempt to preserve the event intentionally. And this is opposed to, quote unquote, restoring a work of art to something similar to its former ideological position, in which that ideology comes first. I'm sure there are other positions to take as well, but these two situations stood out in a really interesting way to me, so I figured it'd be something interesting to continue to think about. I want to end this with a discussion I really loved on an episode of the Orange Pill podcast called Bitcoin Reveals the Fiat Dark Ages, in which there's discussion about systemic collapses. The segment starts on hour 1, minute 11, and the 32nd second, and goes along as such. Yeah, this insurrection that happened in DC, it looks like Comic-Con, right? And I think that's how it ends. In an enormous Comic-Con festival, where everyone dresses up like animals or superheroes, goes down to the street, and beats the crap out of each other. The end. I'll link the podcast down below as well. As always, thanks for listening.